Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another panel discussion in Future Ready Education Summit. In this panel, we have our eminent speaker who are going to discuss on the topic impact of hybrid and blended learning models, challenges and practices. So we have Ms. Sakshi Sojatia, Director of Neerja Modi School. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubham sir.
Welcome and hello.
And we are joined by Dr. Sujash Bhattacharya, who is the principal of ITM Global School. Welcome, sir.
Hello and welcome.
And we are so glad to welcome Mr. Alan Anderson, who is the director of Chaman Bhartiya School. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So right now, I'll just request Ms. Sakshi to moderate this session and take it ahead. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubham. Thank you so much. First of all, I really want to thank you for actually bringing us together on this platform, where we could actually share our insights or share our experiences with the topic. And I feel this is not only a simple discussion on a particular topic. Actually, we are getting four different perspectives. Of course, Mohanty ma'am is not here with us, but otherwise, I was ready that yes, today we'll be getting perspective of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. What these states feel about this particular topic, what blended learning for them is. So definitely I'm very excited and I'm looking forward to this session. And so the topic of today is blended learning, its challenges and the practices. What I know of blended learning was when actually we were in lockdown. So there was no option with us. So we always have had physical education physically, where the teachers were interacting physically with the students and teaching, which we call the face to face classroom teaching. So this lockdown, when it happened, everything was haywire, and suddenly we all switched to digital mode of learning, digital mode of teaching. And that time we realized how important this term blended learning is, because when everything was offline, physical, we of course had smart boards, we had digital boards, we had few language labs which were running through computers, but the term was not very clear. But after lockdown, I felt when the teachers suddenly had to be tech savvy, they had to learn all the digital tools. It suddenly everything became online. And now when we are back to our normal routine, still online, and still the usage of digital tools has increased. And that is why I feel this blended learning is so very much important, because now the students are so much used to watching videos, ppts and whatnot, when we are teaching the curriculum. I feel the important features of blended learning environment are, first, the increased student engagement in learning, right? Because it is according to their pace, their convenience. Then the enhanced teacher and student interaction, responsibility for learning, time management and flexibility, improved student learning outcomes, enhanced institutional reputation. Of course, the ones who are following blended learning model will definitely have an extra edge over the traditional form of teaching. Then better opportunities for experiential learning, like here at our school we are using VR lab, which is again an example of blended learning. Of course, with this, students get more increased learning skills, greater access to information, improved satisfaction and learning outcomes, and opportunities both to learn with others and to teach others. So this is my take on what blended learning is to me. Now I would now move to my first question, which is to Dr. Sujash Bhattacharya. So what, according to you, is hybrid or blended learning, and how does a blended classroom improvise the student environment, if according to you it does? How?
All right. When we are referring to the term blended, it refers to a mix. So it's an invaluable mix of you know in-person teaching and online teaching. So it brings together um, you know a face-to-face interaction, and at the same time it accords a lot of space to students to learn online. And that means, in a way, it becomes student centric, because when the students are learning online, if it's not a live classroom experience, then they're learning at their own pace, as you referred to it, and they're learning at their own place, and they're learning according to their own convenience. So it definitely entails a lot of positivity, and if properly utilized, then you know we can do the best of it. For example, in certain kinds of courses, certain teachers might not always be available. So the face-to-face interaction with the teacher can be for a certain period of time, and then the rest of it can follow online, and the students can learn from home, and they can you know learn at their own time, uh, according to their own conveniences, and this actually helps the students to learn the very way that they want to. So blended learning therefore has a lot of takeaways, and it's definitely the future forward.
Okay. Yes, sir. As you said, it is a mix definitely, and it is student centric, because the student can learn anywhere they want, with whatever pace they want, and in whatever mode they want, and in whatever language also, I would say, they want. So
Yes.
I think we have now moved to a system where we should actually respond to the students' aims, aspirations and dreams, and blended learning definitely can be one way, to reach to their expectations. So yes, moving on to Anderson's son. So my question to you is, how can hybrid learning be the future of any educational institution against the traditional form of education?
I would start saying that hybrid models and digital technology is not in itself innovating teaching. You can teach in a very traditional way, also with technology. So whenever we talk about hybrid models or use of digital technology and AI in education, we need to start with what what do we actually want to innovate? What do we want to achieve? What are the problems in today's education? And if we do that, it will be very clear that the digital technology can be part of the solution, can help us to do these innovations. And I think some of the things we need to do much more is we need to have more self-directed learning, more personalized learning. We need to have more collaborative learning, more experimental learning. We need much better data about learning. We need to reach out to the real world and work with the problems in the real world and use design thinking to create solutions. So if we take, for example, artificial intelligence, uh, suddenly you have a digital tool where you get feedback from your learning resources. The learning resources can be adaptive. So in that way, you know yourself when you have understood a subject and when you haven't. And doing that, you get data about your learning, and teachers can look at the data and they can target their teaching to areas where the students have problems. So for me, it's very crucial to underline, when we talk about blended learning or hybrid models, it must be blended. In primary and secondary school, there is a need to be in a community with other children and professional grown-ups. We can't take that out of the picture. It's an essential part of becoming a human being. It's essential for social and emotional development. But what I feel with hybrid models is that the teacher can be used in a much better way, because basic learning of basic concepts and topics can be done in a very good way with good digital learning materials, so that the teacher can come and teach the higher level, have discussions, have perspectives, so that we have deep learning and critical thinking as part of the learning process. So my point is that we can't isolate the use of digital technology from discussing pedagogy and curriculum and what we want from education. But if we start doing that, definitely we have so many tools in digital technology that we can't do without. But the reason why I say this, and I know I talk too much, but the reason is that I think there's a little too much digital optimism in India. So we have new portals that say that they can do much better than schools, and they can do it for a lower price, and so on and so forth. And I really don't believe that. I think what we saw on the lockdown was that we did better than no schools, but the children had big problems in their social and emotional development. So it made it clear that we can use the experience, but we need to combine it with face-to-face teaching and learning. Thank you.
Definitely, sir. I 100% agree that not only digital learning can give us the outcomes, face to face is so much important when the teacher is physically communicating in the classroom, where the teacher can actually see what the students are doing, in what state they are they mentally present in the classroom or not, because online you never know what they were doing behind the cameras. They are eating their lunch, or they are chit chatting with the siblings and whatnot. So of course there were a lot of challenges with online learning, but yeah, in times like these, definitely it proved that yes, either we could have no learning or we could have some learning through online teaching. Moving on to the next question to Sujash sir. How can hybrid learning be implemented in government schools, or how can it be promoted and implemented by any country's government? What is your take on it, sir?
Okay. Um, I mean, when we are talking about Indian schools, and especially when we look at the private sector schools and the government sector schools, we find that one thing that defines the difference is the huge, digital divide, and where a large chunk of Indian students missed out in the last 2 years isn't getting some basic education. They lost their their aspect to basic numerical skills, basic linguistic skills, and all this happened because you know they did not have access to technology. And this is where governmental intervention and the intervention of all you know good thinking people of the nation are required. The NGOs can come forward, individual institutions can come forward, and they can rectify this situation. The first thing that is required for blended learning is access to the internet. And this has to be first made available in the remote parts of India, and especially in rural India. I know that most of the government schools in most of the states remained closed for the last 2 years, and these students lost out 2 valuable years of their childhood. And that's so very sad, because when our students were learning, we know that students in other schools were not getting access to it. For example, what we tried to do was, we have a village close by called Arapura, and we knew that the students in that school were not getting any access to education at all. So we reached out to them. We culled out some of our old systems and we shared it with them. And we asked them to come, in smaller batches on alternate days, and have access to some of the education that we were, you know, sort of having in our school. And at least that helped those students, and they were so happy to come, they were so happy to come back to school in a scattered way, and have access to technology. The other thing is access to hardware. So it's not just the internet, it's also access to the devices. So we have the digitally rich and we have the digitally poor, not just in India, but all across the southern bloc of the world. And this means that these devices need to be made available. I mean, one very easy way in which the governments in India and governments elsewhere in the world could have solved the problem was, they could have, got some tablets and filled them up with lectures and with some digital, access to education, and handed them over to the students. And they could have studied them, brought them back to school, and get more resources loaded into them. This way, they could have lost, uh, they would not have lost, a, 2 very valuable years in their lives. But it did not happen, and uh, it it was not very difficult to do. So I believe that these are the ways in which, we can, sort of we can make hybrid learning and blended learning accessible to the students. And the other very important aspect is training. Um, because when the pandemic hit us, it's not just the students, but the teachers also felt that we lacked enough training. So there was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of, you know, uh, worry about how to handle the new devices, how to handle the new apps, how to handle the new platforms. So this can be bridged through training. So all over the world, if we want blended learning to succeed, we need to make internet accessible, we need to make hardware accessible, we need to make training more easily available. So once these things happen, not just in our country, but in all countries all over the world, this will be possible. Of course, the first world is much way ahead. They have access to most of these things, so you know uh, they would not lose out much in that. But in the developing part of the world and in the underdeveloped part of the world, we really need to think, and we really need to plan ahead for situations like this. For example, now there's a war in Ukraine, and um, I can I mean I just can't imagine how students there are coping with the situation. Many of them have probably moved out of the country, um, and there I know that in some countries, uh, those Western European countries are actually making education available to them. But those who could not move out, they are losing out on education. So we need to prepare ourselves for the future and for situations like this. Thank you.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. And with this, I have a small story to share. So, uh, in a nearby village. But there were few teachers, so during lockdown they used their phones and they gave it to their neighbors who were students, so that they could get the access to the online learning. So these are some small initiatives that we all can take together, which can someday create a big difference in the lives of students here in India, and not only India, like everywhere in the world. My next question to Alan sir: education in India is driven by a teacher-centered approach, and expecting these students to switch over quickly to collaborative and technology-enabled learning can be stressful for them and may accentuate the existing dropout rate. How this can be overcome so that India can also, in a great way, adopt blended learning?
We started my school here in Bangalore, Chamanbata School, during lockdown. So in the first academic year, we didn't see our students at all. In the second, we had some months where the students were here, but we did most of it digitally. And we started doing problem-based learning and projects already during the first lockdown period. And how could we do that? Yeah, I think the key to everything in education is school culture and teacher professional development. So I insisted on teachers coming to school so that we could have sharing and professional development as usual, and create a school culture which was crucial for a new school like ours. But I think professional development in the sense that teachers collaborate in preparing their lessons, they do projects together, they observe each other's teaching, they share good or bad experiences and make new plans. That is the way we have done it. And what I have seen is that even though many of our teachers didn't know anything about problem-based learning, and they had never taught with technology before, all our teachers and students have their own iPads. But by creating this culture of collaboration, they helped each other. So everyone did it without knowing that it's very difficult to do problem-based learning. But because there were some of our teachers who were outstanding and had experience in science, they could share their experiences and create time slots for discussing and evaluation and so on. So I think we need to have more professional development, and we need a change of school culture, and that must be connected to professional development, because we need to break down the hierarchical Indian system of school leadership. We need to have much more freedom and autonomy for teachers, so that we trust that they can do a good job, so that we as leaders facilitate them in doing it, but we trust that they can do it. We don't come with ready-made lesson plans and details about what to do in February and March. We trust that when they know the curriculum and work together, they can find the best possible solutions for their students. And that has been a big learning for me coming to India, because I come from Denmark and Scandinavia, so that is ingrained in our culture. I've learned so much more positive in India also, but this school culture where we trust teachers, where we create an environment for collaboration, that is very crucial. And I didn't expect that it could be possible already in the online setting, but because we were together and shared, it could be done. So now when I talk about professional development, It's not some expert sharing 120 slides. It's about the teachers getting, with inspiration from experts, start working together and planning lessons and doing as much as possible together. And when they do that, it will come gradually, because my experience is that Indian teachers basically are good and well educated. So they just need the freedom and inspiration to change the way they teach. And right now, that is not the culture. So they do what they think their leaders expect from them, or the boards expect from them. And technology can actually help us, because with technology, and when you start problem-based learning with projects and experimental learning, many of these changes will come, because the teachers will and the leaders will see that we cannot do problem-based learning and interdisciplinary teaching without changing the school culture. So by implementing concepts like that and having professional development around it, we can make a change. Because I think what I have seen, and I've interviewed hundreds of teachers in India, basic quality is fine. The mindset is fine. They want to do a good job. They love their children. So it can absolutely be done.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Definitely, you were talking about professional development, which is so much important to enhance blended learning in India, of course.
And maybe I should say it even clearer, change of leadership.
Change
Leadership
of.
needs to change attitudes.
So, like, in what terms? How do you think? Like, how?
To create this culture of sharing, we can't have a very hierarchical system. We need to collaborate and use the expertise of both leaders and facilitators. What I see is a culture where teachers wait to see what management is telling them to do. And the teachers are not to blame, management is to blame, because they need to create the culture where they invite ideas, invite teachers to do something they haven't done before. They invite the teachers to be courageous and fail and not blame them afterwards for trying. So I think you will never see a change of school culture and never see a collaborative environment if leadership doesn't change in India.
Definitely, sir. I agree. Only if we give them the space,
Very
to
true, very true.
explore, to be creative, to make mistakes with whatever innovation they are doing in their teaching, we would not be able to create that change which we aspire for. Definitely, sir. With this, I have another question for both of you. Like, we talk about change, we talk about personalized teaching and experimental teaching, collaborative teaching. Now, when NEP, the National Education Policy, has come into force or will come soon, what do you think? How will it impact? How blended learning will impact education, and what NEP has in store for us, and how would it would promote blended learning through its curriculum or
Actually, NEP is promoting, equity of education. So, if in a country like India we want education to be available to all, then certain kinds of pedagogical changes need to take place, and the government and the institutions need to think alike, and they need to come together hand in hand and implement it. So if we are thinking that no student in India will miss out on education, if we are to think that right to education um, should not be just a statement in itself but really implemented, then all good thinking people, they need to come forward and make it possible. For example, the government is trying to put together the data collected at the Anganwadi schools, the and then make it accessible to the next level of schools. And when that will happen, then those schools will know uh, what is the real group of students who should be moving to their schools, and uh, what level of skills they have actually uh, you know sort of reached. Once those parameters are known, then those lower secondary schools can then start working on them. And the government is thinking of clustering together schools. So if in a particular area, remote area or a rural area, there is one secondary school for several lower secondary and primary schools, then how to share the resources, both the human resource and the the infrastructure. So when these things will happen, then I think a lot of the gaps that we see in our education would slowly get rectified. But I don't see it happening, in a very short space of time. We have to give it time, and we have lost several years, and we have to make up for them. And we need to see that children are not sucked into employment at a time when they should have access to education. It was the case in 19th century Europe, and we are in the 21st century in India, and we still see children on the road, and they do not have access to education. um, we need to make it available, maybe through evening schools, maybe by making certain basic aspects of their life available to them, so that we can bring them back into schooling. We can, for example, I know that in a lot of schools in rural India, the children go to schools because they know that they will get their midday meal. That's still such a sad condition, because I know teachers there who spend a lot of their time actually arranging for their meals when they should actually be preparing for their lessons. So these things are there in India, and the NEP is a good vision forward. It's a vision statement, and there will be hits and misses. But as Mr. Anderson was saying, um, it's not just leadership in schools. I'll make it and in the broader way, it's our leadership uh, at the local level, at the community level, at the political level, at the state and central level, who need to actually allow people to work. And as he said, we need to be brave. If we make a mistake, it's fine. We will learn from that mistake, and we will go forward and learn from each other. For example, during the pandemic, we were all learning from each other. I mean, um, for example, I would be taking help from some of my teachers about certain kinds of technologies, and we would be sharing our knowledge of platforms and technologies, and how to attach a particular platform to our LMS. So those kinds of things were happening, and it was a great time to actually realize that things should not come from the top alone, but it should be everybody coming together and learning together. Thank you.
Right. Definitely. So with this, even I remember when in during lockdown, my principal, who is not very technology, very much into technology, he would always take my help. Ma'am, how do you do this? How do you do that? And with time, he was a pro then, because he learned so much during these 2 years that now he is a pro. So yeah, anyway, moving to Anderson's son. So what do you think, how blended learning will impact NEP, or do you think the government will change the curriculum according to blended learning model, or would it remain what it is?
If if NEP is true to their vision, they will definitely have to change curriculum and test system in India. Otherwise, it's just words and will never be a reality. But I also think it will gradually happen. And that's why I see NEP not as solution in itself, but it will gradually help changing the notion of what education is. And it's not rote learning. It's not just to pass tests. It's about developing as a human being and make good citizens and people who can live and thrive in the modern world. So it has helped me when I interact with parents, because some of them might feel that some of my ideas about education, when we talk about problem-based learning and personalized learning, sound a little crazy. But when I can say, yes, but we are only doing what we are supposed to do according to NEP, this is the future mainstream. It is not crazy progressiveness. So I think it will have a positive impact in that sense. But when some states now say they have already implemented NEP, they don't know what it is, because it's fundamental change of education in India, and it cannot happen within
overnight.
just 10 years. It's a long process, but we have to work towards that goal. And I'm very happy that you're so focused on equity, because of course that is the main problem in India. What I'm talking about is luxury compared to that. But I'm sure NEP will over the years be seen as a support for schools who want to change school culture and pedagogy.
Definitely, sir. As they say, if it is implemented in the proper way and with the vision which they carry, it is definitely going to transform education in India for sure. So, yeah, moving on to the conclusion, Sujash, sir, I would want you to state one application of the hybrid learning model that you have implemented in your school.
Okay. What we did was, especially in the second year, when hybrid learning actually came more into focus, we had less access to the students. The teachers were coming to school, but the students were only coming at on certain days, or only for a certain period of time, and we did not have them in school for as long as we would have loved to, and as long as they would have loved to, because they were missing out on a lot of activities, because the school is not just about learning from the textbook, but it's also about learning about life in entirety, and immersing themselves and preparing themselves for the community at large. So we would give them certain projects, and we would give them guidelines for them, and then we would leave it to them to implement them. So they would prepare those assignments, they would prepare those projects, and they would have access to the net, and therefore access to a large array of ideas from across the world, and they would put them together, and the end result was such that when they would bring it to us, or they would submit it say as a PowerPoint presentation or as a video on our LMS, we as teachers uh, would be delighted to see the end result, because sometimes just by keeping them in school and interacting with them, we would have probably not seen the end result that we saw during that period of time, because a lot of these time was spent by these students uh, learning to learn, and that particular independence that they received while we were implementing the hybrid learning mode actually make them mature in a certain way. They not only learned about technology and the use of technology, but they learned how to avail that technology for learning more, and learning in their own way, and learning as per their own interest. So uh, some projects had certain ideas which would probably not have taken place within the classroom, but they happened because these students were taking home the ideas from school, and then putting together their own ideas and bringing together ideas that they were receiving from all of the sources on the net. So it was I think the best way of the hybrid learning process taking place. Thank you.
So with that, I would want you to share one challenge also that you faced.
uh, the major challenge was uh, you know teaching them how to use the technology, because when the pandemic suddenly hit us in 2019, I mean, a large section of the student body and the teachers and the parents were not prepared for it. And though some of the technologies were available, they were not, you know, so well known to the entire body of there's this. There's the stakeholders, as we can call them, and so it took us time to train the teachers, to orient the students, to orient the parents. A lot of mentoring took place, a lot of peer learning took place. Students learned from each other, the teachers learned from each other. And, you know, within a course of time, say within 6 months' time, we saw that we were able to handle the situation better. So that was the main channel, the lack of training and making the training available, because the platforms were already there, the technology was already there. Thank you.
Alan sir, Sujash sir actually talked about the time when lockdown was there, and the application and the challenges he faced during that time. From you, I want uh, to share some applications and challenges that you're facing now when school have opened physically.
Yeah, we open only on the 4th of July. So right now our teachers are planning next academic year. And today, actually, the new teachers have an iPad course. So I will say that the basis for any school that wants to implement hybrid models is that every student and every staff member must have their own device. It must become a personal device. And it's a luxury to say it. Not all parents can afford that. I know that. But it's just to say that in order to for learning really to become personalized, you also need some kind of, what can you say, personal relationship to your device. You know how it is organized, you know what apps you usually use, and so on and so forth. And of course we continue doing that, but we can see already now with our new teachers, they only got their iPad on the day 4, so they couldn't really work before they got their iPad. So they are totally dependent on the gadget. And it's the same with the students. A little anecdote: when the students came back after lockdown, one of the teachers did a project with the class, and we had very strict privacy protection in the school, so they couldn't use Google, or they couldn't use YouTube, and they came to me, "How do you think we could make a project without Google? Are you crazy?" And I had to admit that they were right. You can't make a project, you can't have problem-based learning without a good search machine. So we opened up for Google with all the problems that comes from this. So I would say challenge will always be that teachers must have a device and they must have the necessary training. But they also need to be open for children to teach them, because the children only need to have an iPad for a few days and then they know the workarounds and have already found good apps to use. So teachers should be open for a situation where children know more about digital gadgets than they do themselves. It's not dangerous, it's just to ask for help. I would say during lockdown, the most important app, and it's very simple and primitive, but it was Teams. That was what brought us together. That was what made it possible to have children working together, doing projects, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, we don't need it only if we have special projects where we need to interact with people in other countries or in other parts of India. But the simple tool made schooling possible during lockdown. So that was the most crucial. Otherwise, I would say for the future, I think what can really be a game changer in schools is adaptive learning materials. That is, learning materials with built-in AI and machine learning, so that children actually get feedback from the learning material and advice on where to learn more about this they struggle with. And it has started some at least international publishers already make materials like that. But I really think that would be a good investment. Also in parts of India with bad internet connection, because you don't need to be online all the time, just now and then. So I think that will really change the role of the teachers, because the teachers will not need to teach what the learner can see herself in the textbook. So the teacher will need to go into high order teaching. And that is also needed, but it will somehow change the role of the teacher from doing basic presentations about basic concepts into more discussion, more perspective, more critical thinking. And again, AI can help us doing that, because children can in their own pace study before they come to school, and the teacher will already know who has struggled with understanding the basic concepts and can concentrate on them. So that is a crucial part of the future for schools, I think.
Right. So talking about my school, I would say we have IVR labs, that is integrated virtual reality lab, where we have VR glasses and we send children, to see through the glasses whatever their topic is, and we have integrated few of their important topics with that VR glass so that they can go through it visually. So that is a very nice, creative, and of course an interactive manner in which we are trying to impart education in our city. But yeah, of course, it has its limitation, because they are very expensive. We have, only 15 or 20, and we have to, of course, take one class at a time, which is a class of say 30, 35. So of course, it is sometimes a bit time consuming, and to keep up with the content, like every year we have new content, so it sometimes becomes difficult. So yeah, that is a challenge for us. But anyway, I think we are done with the discussion, and for me, I have to say it was a really knowledgeable session, and it was nice interacting with Sujash sir and Alan sir. Yes, Shubham, we are done, and we are enriched with the discussion, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you
so
so
much
much
for
for
having
your
me.
yeah, thank you so much, all the eminent speakers, for sharing so much valuable insights of yours and making this panel so interesting. And as we talked about this particular hybrid and blended learning model, so it actually matches with the vision. And thank you so much, Mr. Allen and Sujash Bhattacharya sir and Sakshi ma'am, for sharing the way we are going ahead and we are taking ahead this method. So thank you so much. And for the delegates in this panel, we were joined by Mr. Alan Anderson, who is the director of Chaman Bhartiya School, Ms. Sakshi Sojatia, who is the director of Neerja Modi School, and Dr. Sujash Bhattacharya, who is the principal of ITM Global School. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
nice
you
day.
for
Thanks.
having us.